The following interview is a presentation of Ofiɔ Media. I want to move on and ask you about your book, Nigerian Pentecostalism, which I wish I could have an entire interview just dedicated to talking to you about this text, because it's so full of interesting and thought-provoking framings, and it's such an insightful text. But just a very sort of simple question about it. I'd like to start by asking you to summarize in whatever way feels least tedious to you, because I'm sure this isn't the first time you've been asked to do it, to please summarize the related concepts of the phenomenal veil and the spell of the invisible that you developed in that text. And if you could also touch briefly on the reverence that it seems that some Pentecostals have for those who can report back to them what's on the other side of the veil, so to speak.
Yes, so that's an excellent question. Actually, that summarizes the book, because I use this spell of invisible at the beginning of every chapter, and I was walking it through. So what I was, the narrative that I was developing in that book, or the thesis, was to look at Nigerian Pentecostalism through this lens, albeit it's a narrow lens, but the lens of saying, what is their concern with what is beyond the phenomenal veil? Now, what I mean by phenomenal veil, in a sense, harks back to a little bit to Immanuel Kant, that said we have the phenomenal veil. That's things that we can know through our senses. And then there are things at the nominal, that is the things we cannot know through the usual five senses or so. There are things spiritual, right? Or there are things about God so we cannot know. So for Immanuel Kant, he said we should focus our attention on the phenomenal, just like science, right? Focus on the physical, the physical phenomenon, what we can ascertain, what we can investigate with the five senses that we have, or what are the instruments that we use to support those five senses. So a telescope actually is an instrument that helps your eye to see further. So you are dealing with it. But then he said, we can never know things in their nominal form, in themselves. We should focus on just the physical. But in Nigerian Pentecostalism or African Pentecostalism, oftentimes Pentecostal practice all over the world, people want to know what is beyond the physical. Yeah, and so that's what I mean by piercing the phenomenal veil. At least what is beyond the physical? What is beyond what we can know with our five senses and the instruments that we have? What is behind that? And that is the question that for them drives them unto God, right? So they're not just going to God and be satisfied with the prayers and the praise they will have on a normal day, like a Methodist church in the US or Presbyterian church in the US. But they want to know what is behind that. And so it's almost like it compels them. It draws them. And so it becomes like a spell. That is the spell of the invisible. So the invisible is another word for the nominal, that the things that we cannot see, they want to know what is there. So, and in a sense, this is also of very much importance in African traditional religion. Going back to Evans Pritchard's work on the Azande, Azande, the magic of the Azande, that if something happens to you, right, Africans don't just jump to the spiritual realm or so. They know how to deal with the physical, right? But if something keeps happening to you, it will trigger a certain reaction to know more why that is happening to you. So to give one example, and this is not about all Africans, but we're talking about Pentecostals. If I live close to the I-95 here, not very far from my house, and if we find out that there's a particular junction that an accident has occurred, there was a car crash. Well, the police will come, the engineers will come, they say, okay, people are driving, it's a bad driver. But if you find out that accidents keep occurring at that junction over and over again, the scientist, the engineer will ask the question, why is this happening? Is it as a result of bad construction or the way people drive, or is it at a particular time of the day? Why is it occurring? So then you go to a scientific engineering explanation, right? So there is the first order explanation. Everybody knows what is happening. But if you keep occurring, we say, is there something about this road that we don't know? Is there something about the construction of this road that we don't know? And then the scientists will try to investigate that and maybe fix the road or the flow of traffic, or maybe the traffic light is not doing its work very well. That's why we keep having accidents. That is a second order explanation. But the first time an accident happens, you're not going to restructure the road. So people drive carelessly. So it happens. In the same way about the spiritual. So Africans don't jump into the spiritual explanation, which is a second order explanation. They'll try to, if a woman is driving and our car breaks down on the first day, maybe there's no fuel, bad stuff. But if it keeps happening at the same spot or over and again, she's going to say, is there something else to it? Now, this is where the phenomenal veil come in. The Africans that are not that spiritual inclined or Pentecostal will try to investigate within the phenomenal realm, the physical. Maybe there's a bad plug or something about my car. But the Pentecostal at some point will say, maybe there are some spirits, demons, or God is involved. And that is what I'm calling trying to pierce the phenomenal veil, like trying to go beyond the physical. And what Pentecostalism has done in Nigeria is that it over time has been shortening that space between the first order explanation and second order explanation. In short, even in some cases, people are jumping straight to the second order, which is not what was in traditional African religion. Traditional African religion, you deal with the physical as much as possible with the accumulated knowledge of society. It's only when an accumulated knowledge or experimental knowledge that may come to dealing with that problem. It's only when those things have failed that they try to look for a spiritual explanation. But with Pentecostalism, it appears, and with the disaster that is the post-colony in Africa, and with all the chaos that is going on with bad governance and everything that is suffering, people have short-circuited that process. They're easily moving up to the phenomenal realm. I mean, beyond the phenomenal realm to the numinal realm. And so that inclination, that almost knee-jerk reaction to look for something beyond the physical to explain what is happening to you, to the person in the physical, is what I'm calling the spell of the invisible, right? Now, since that knowledge is not easily available to everybody, so you have to go through techniques, what Foucault would call techniques of the self or the self, right? You got to go through fasting and prayer to be able to see beyond the physical. So there are some men and women who call themselves men of God, women of God, that feel that they have special access to that realm of knowledge. And since access to that realm of knowledge is scarce, their claim and the perception of people that they have it makes them valuable. So people will give them money, they will give them their tithe, they will give them so that they will be able to guide them how to live their life, because they believe that the influence of the spiritual, what is beyond the phenomenal veil, actually has control over day-to-day activities of an individual, or even over the long run. And this is what typically has always been called the spiritualistic explanation of life, that what we don't see with our eyes, the invisible. Now, we're not talking of the scientific invisible, which is after we can't see the virus with our eyes. We can't see COVID-19 with our eyes. Yeah, but yeah, they're going beyond that, right? So instead of not seeing atoms and viruses and bacteria with our eyes, they feel that there are spirit beings that we don't see with our eyes that that are causing their problem or the obstacles they face in life, and therefore the specialist, the religious specialist who has knowledge of that realm and that can deal with it becomes valuable. Just like the way for most of us when the coronavirus happened, we relied on the scientists who know how to operate in that world to guide us. So Fauci and all the scientists become increasingly important in telling us what to do. But if you are on this spiritual explanatory model, and you invested your life in piercing the phenomenal veil, then those specialists in that area also becomes valuable. And I felt that the spell of the invisible, what I've just explained to you, is a core feature of Pentecostalism in Africa. If you leave it out from your explanation of Nigerian or African Pentecostalism, you had missed a lot. And I felt understanding these dynamics of this, what I call the spell of the invisible, almost like a spell over the whole movement, and it drives them forward. It structures this. As a matter of fact, it has become a condition of possibility, if not the condition of possibility, for a lot of things that happen in the movement.
That's an amazing answer and way of tying together a lot of elements in the text. Thank you so much for that. And I want to return to the text in a minute, but I'm first going to ask what's kind of an unorthodox question. So feel free to balk at it or shoot it down if you're not feeling it. But I'm curious to hear your reaction to a suggestion that's just my own, that at least, at the level of a rough analogy, there's something in the contemporary American, U.S. political experience that mirrors this notion of a divide between the nominal and the phenomenal, or at least of the idea that one's eyes are not necessarily always to be believed because there's a deeper truth out there waiting to be decoded. And when I say that, I'm thinking not only about right-wing conspiracy theory-based movements like QAnon, or even slightly kind of more mainstream thought leaders like Alex Jones, but also about sentiments that circulate in leftist circles in the US about the difficulties discerning which kinds of progressive policies would be effective versus which ones only sound good on paper, the question of whether a political aspirant is a true progressive or an unreliable careerist, et cetera. Do you think there's anything kind of valid to that analogy?
Yeah, there's something valid, especially in the U.S. Election, and Paula White praying for the African angels to come in and make sure that they stamp the finger, they make sure that the election goes in favor of Donald Trump. So yeah, but so this the idea of looking beyond the veil has always been there in the West. So it's not something, it never went away, right, from the time. But the thing about it is that the rise of science and enlightenment predominated over everything, but it's always there at the margin. Even before then, you walk in the streets of New York or LA or Chicago or London, you find palm readers, things like that, astrology. So these things were there, but they were on the margins. They did not determine the major explanatory model of the society or of the civilization. They were there, and sometimes people will consult it for fun or so. But what has happened in the last election and recently, it was mainstreamed, right? All of a sudden, it was mainstream. And once people get into this mindset that there's always something behind that they are not seeing, then all of a sudden, people who claim to have access to that becomes increasingly important, whether those people happen to be heads of governments or pastors, leaders. They become to be important because people now don't believe their eyes anymore. They don't believe the instrumentations of science anymore because they feel that there's always more. And that more could be more in the spiritual realm or more that they're not telling us. There's always something more. So that is there. So I'm not surprised that it will happen. And oftentimes those kinds of things happen when a society is going through crisis, right? When there's a massive doubt of its institutions, as if its institutions can no longer manage the passage of time. And when people begin to feel that they're running out of time, that there's some kind of pressure, those kinds of views tend to come up onto the surface. As a matter of fact, when the Trump phenomena occurred, some scholars went back to an essay I've published before Trump came, that America is what I call moral panic, or what they call temporal panic. That America is going through a temporal panic, and when societies go through a temporal panic, it will throw up a leader who will promise them that there's going to be a massive change, a cargo will come, and they begin to doubt every institution. And they begin. So I wrote that article. I didn't know Trump was going to come up, but when it did come up, it almost like I predicted this kind of pattern. Because if you understand what temporal or what they call moral panic causes, and then Trump came in and he did on that. So those kinds of things, if we study it also, but one thing about the Trump era and all these things we're talking about, people have not really investigated the impact of temporal panic, moral panic. And I went through American history, like the McCarthy era, right? So when a society goes through moral panic, it could do two things. It may want to inflate its commitment to the outside world, or if you want to look back. In the McCarthy era, they thought communism was the problem, right? And therefore it was a retreat. In the Trump era, it's a form of a retreat. But once you retreat, when that phenomenon of retreat or inflation occurs, one way it also shows itself is that you begin to look for the fifth columns inside yourself. Who are the people that are fouling the process from within? So you don't only attack outsiders, you begin to attack insiders, because there are certain people who are not making it work. It's because we don't have full cooperation. There are rats and snitches among us. So that's what's also happening in the left. So America is going through this phase, right? So in the Pentecostal worldview, with that kind of stuff, when things are not working, one of the things that they will blame, what they say, household enemies. It's not only the witches outside is attacking you. There is somebody within your home that is attacking you, what they call the household enemies. So the effect of that is that you don't trust anybody anymore. Truth becomes a problem. And my friend Ruth Marshall, in her book, Pentecostal Revolution, actually talks about how that kind of mindset destroys truth, that no one believes truth anymore because everything is thrown up in the air, as if she was talking about the Trump era, right? So there's a lot of things that people could study about Pentecostalism. What scholars like Ruth Marshall and myself have written about this phenomenon in a religious setting happening in America. But on a bigger global level, at the level of human beings, right? We've been, like the French philosopher Alain Badiou will say, we've been having this problem right from the time of Plato. And what do I mean by we're having this problem right from the time of Plato? Alain Badiou said, the French philosopher who wrote Being an Event, a major work. His point is that he said human beings, we are given to, if we see this glass on the street, our mind will automatically think that there's a better form of the glass. There's a better. If you see a watch, there's a watch, but there's a better form. And you could see that is what led Plato to look at material and the ideas form, right? He's seen a table. He said, there'll be the idea of a table somewhere in heaven, somewhere in the eternal, and that what is happening here is manifesting it also. So everything now has a counterpart outside, a counterpart that is beyond the phenomenal veil. Plato never told us he could see the ideal form is beyond the phenomenal veil. But there's always that phenomenon. There must be something behind. Right? In the same way, early illiterate societies were reacting to the radio. They get the radio speaking. They want to look behind. Well, there should be a human being there. So and this is once you understand it from the point of view of even Plato, that this material and ideal form, right? So and that's why people like Karl Marx of the materialistic movement says there is nothing beyond the material. But it's very difficult for us to ignore. So when people say there's something beyond the material, you can approach it through religion if you think that there's something beyond the material, right? Or you could philosophize about it like Plato says there's an ideal form. And so we are always looking for that ideal form. And we want to measure our earthly or material performance or existence or object against that ideal form that is there. So you could see this. So this tension would pop up in society, especially when the society sees itself as in crisis, when it begins to doubt its own institutions that have always worked for it. It will happen. So your observations are very correct that we can look at what is happening with the Pentecostal movement, especially in a place like Nigeria, and use it to map some of the things that are happening in the United States.
Wow, thank you so much. That's a really interesting answer. There's a concept you mentioned in your book, Nigerian Pentecostalism, which you call power distance. I want to ask you about power distance and the use of invisibility as a weapon that the powerful deploy against the weak in West Africa, especially sort of in the context of low levels of government transparency. I think of my own time that about a year and a half that I was living in Ghana, during which time I was working as a journalist, and really, working in a media house in Accra. It was a little bit shocking that, there's a press conference, and whatever the speaker decides to say or not to say, that's the amount of public transparency that you get around whatever the issue was that was being discussed at the press conference. So yeah, really, I guess just to reflect on invisibility as a weapon and power distance, if you would.
Yeah. So what I meant by power distance is a concept I was borrowing from a scholar in management. What I meant is that in Africa or in Ghana or Nigeria, when someone is above you in the hierarchy, there's a lot of power between, but there's a lot of power distance in the sense that the person has a lot of power and you have less power. So, and this all in relative terms. Take for instance, if you're a professor in Nigeria, when you come to the class, you're almost like a demigod. Your students are not allowed to question you in the way they do in the US. Of course, they will not even call you by your first name. They have to call you by your last name. So there's a lot of difference. Of course, you find a little bit of that in Germany also. So there's a lot of power distance. So the boss always makes you realize that he's above you. There is not much of collegiality between those who are up higher and those who are lower. And that is the way the system works. You are supposed to, if you are lower in the hierarchy, you are supposed to show a lot of deference, respect to those above you. Now, that in itself may not be a big problem because different cultures find a way to handle differences in the hierarchy. But when it becomes an issue when it doesn't allow people to question what the superior is doing, or allows the superior to get away with things that he or she should be held accountable. When it goes against accountability, right? So there's a lot of, and so how does this work in the church? So the pastor, the man of God, the woman of God who is anointed, who have this access or presumed access to the invisible realm, becomes almost unquestionable, right? So even in a church setting, his decisions are not questioned. It's not open to discussion. They come in and say, this is what I want to do. There's a case I cited in the Nigerian Pentecostalism in the book where a church was, the pastor called members of his church, formed the committee to repair the roof because the roof of the church was leaking. And then, so the committee came together and said, yeah, Pastor, can you show us what is in the church account so that we know the shortfall to raise money? And that pastor felt that they had contested his power because he's not used to giving account of the church money annually or monthly or quarterly. It's not. And so for him to ask that question, you've overstepped your bounds. But given the situation, what did he do? When it was finally, they pressed him to prepare a report about the church finances so they will know how to raise the shortfall. He prepared it, and as stated in the book, he put it on the altar of the church. Say, okay, go and take a look at it there. And of course, given the Pentecostal mindset, as if you are going to go to the altar where the pastor sits, as if you are contesting God, as if you don't trust God. Of course, no one did. That's how that project ended. So a woman in the church who was not part of the committee felt that by asking the pastor, that is not the right thing to do. So she financed the whole repair of the roof from her own purse. But it's a simple case of accountability. But because of the power distance, no one could call the pastor to order that it is wrong. You are supposed to give account, right, of the money that is coming in. Many Nigerian churches, Pentecostal churches, don't give annual account of the tithe and offering they get. Nothing, how they spend the money. No one knows. No one gives account. When the government tried to ask them to do it, there was a big protest. They even got someone who's a Pentecostal pastor working for the government, headed that unit of the government. They got him fired because they feel they should not be questioned. And that is what I mean by power distance. And it's only in the churches. It's also in the political realm. It's also in the corporations. If you are working in an African corporation or in an African country, one has to be very careful not to transfer the ethos of the way people relate in America to that. You got to find out exactly what works in that place before you react. Otherwise, they will see you as being cheeky, rude, or something like that. There's a lot of power, and even within the Nigerian churches itself. Now, I happen to be an Ijaw person, so, and a lot of us were attending the church within Christian Church of God, and the predominant ethnic group is Yorubas in that church. Great people, nice people, but they have a culture where if the younger one sees the elder, you almost like bow or take a knee or even prostrate fully. Where we come from, we don't do that. There's the power distance in terms of greeting didn't work out that way. And so when people met people from my area, they would say, oh, they are rude. And Pastor Debo, who is the head of the church, was gracious enough to tell them, no, that is a cultural difference. They are not rude. That's not just the way they know. It's just like Japan, they meet somebody higher in the hierarchy or so. The Japanese will take a bow, a small bow, right? It's not so, but Americans don't do that, right? And so if an American goes to Japan and the Japanese boss doesn't immediately understand that, may think that it's rude, but it's not. So different cultures have a way of acting out power distance. That's what I call power distance. But in the book, I was showing how that cultural trait of Africans that was in a different context, and it worked very well is being transferred to the church, the Pentecostal church, in a way that it in my mind, it was not being deployed usefully. So that is that. That leads to this issue of invisibility as a weapon. Right? One of the things about power in the West or in Africa or elsewhere is that the rich don't want to be seen, but the poor must be seen. Right? The powerful must not be seen. So if you look at even Jeremy Bertram with the panopticon in the British cell, right? So the guard is seeing everybody through the tower, but they can't see him. And that creates the illusion that even when he's not there, it looks like, oh, he's seeing them. And that exercise control. So you could see this fanatical concept of the powerful not being invisible. So the power must be seen and controlled, right? And so once again, go back to Plato. Plato, I think the myth of the judges or so in one of his book, he said where somebody got a ring, and that once it touches the ring, he will see everybody and no one will see him. And the guy used that power, was it to sleep with the king's wife? He could sleep into the bedroom, no one would see him, and he see. So it was, and so that was something about power, that the ability to see everybody and not them seeing you is a form of power. And so this question of invisibility is there. And in one of my books, especially in the charismatic city, I talked about the Oni of Ife. That is the, for some people, is this supreme king of the Yoruba land, although depending on other group may contest that. That is not where I'm going. So when he comes to the public, in the past, he always stays in his palace, he doesn't come out. When he comes to the public, he puts some kind of bits that almost veil his face. So he can see through the veil, but the lower class, the people, his subjects, could not see his face. So you have this form of power, that the powerful is invisible. Just like God can see everybody, we cannot see God. Right? So you could see how it, and that is also a form of power, you know, and you could see how in the political realm that it plays out. That is the question of the invisible. Just like in real life, right? Some people say the World Bank could come to Africa, and because Africans or the IMF, Africans want to get loan from the IMF or the World Bank, they'll ask them to open up their books. They could see, but Africans don't have power to force the IMF or the World Bank to open their books that we can see. So this that the poor are subject to be investigated, to be probed, to be looked at will, while the rich can afford to hide themselves, or people in power can afford to hide themselves. The rich can go off on an island that the poor cannot visit and do whatever they want. But they can always go to the ghetto or drive past your assistance. So invisibility in power is not only in religion, it operates everywhere. And sometimes the invisibility in power could take up a second dimension, in the sense that the rich have the power to see who they want to see and to stop those that cannot see them. They have the power. But they also, at the same time that they have the power to see you, they can also have the power to make sure that you are not seen. That is Invisible Man. You know, the novel Invisible Man. So that you don't exist. They could make you appear, they don't notice you. So they control all the levels of invisibility. They can see you when they want to see you, and they can also make you invisible to people. Your matter does not rise up. And so that's also part of the play of the invisibility of power. Those who are powerful can make themselves invisible. You can never look into their books or what they're doing, right? But they can always see you when they want to see you. But you cannot play the invisible role. They may decide to make you invisible. Not that they confer the power of invisibility on you. They just say your matter and your things do not count. Like what Rancia would say, you are part of no part. You don't count in the political system, but they have the police state to manage you. Yet they make you feel or put you in a place where you do not count. So that is where the logic of invisibility operates. And I'm saying it also works not only in the political realm, also in the religious realm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I encourage anyone who's listening or watching to this interview to check out that book, Nigerian Pentecostalism. It's really a fantastic and powerful read. And like I said earlier, I wish I could spend the whole interview on it.